and assistant head of school. He believes his experiences in both charter and public education suggest some possible lessons that highly effective charters might offer to traditional public schools. Mr. Langley, welcome to you. Now to that lively backstage debate. The film Rise Above the Mark challenges some of Indiana's approaches to public school improvement, standardized tests, charter schools, voucher programs. In the film, Dr. Ravitch talked about some of those issues. We will start our discussion with a couple of minutes reflection, and I'll keep everyone to a couple of minutes. They've hired me to be rude if necessary, that dinner host who keeps the conversation moving. Frame the film, if you would. Talk a little bit about hopeful trends you may have seen around the nation in these and other areas of education reform. A couple of minutes, please, Dr. Ravitch.
It's going to be hard to talk for 2 minutes. The film was fantastic, absolutely incredible. I congratulate Rocky Killian and his team to think that this professional, high-quality film was produced by public school educators is simply astonishing. I've been waiting for Steven Spielberg to do it, but he didn't do it. So thank you, Rocky, for having framed this issue of the centrality of public education to American democracy. I'm a historian of education, and in my view, there are three great institutions that make our society work. One is the Constitution and Bill of Rights. The second is the fact that we have a free market economy buttressed by strong, should be an even stronger social safety net. And third, American public education. American public education, in my view, is under attack. There is an intentional, deliberate, conscious effort to destroy public education, to privatize it, to monetize it, to open it up to entrepreneurs. I think that's very dangerous to our society. It's dangerous to our democracy. And I'm a product of public education, K through 12, Houston, Texas. I would hate to see us lose it because there is, as Mark Tucker said in the film, there is no evidence whatsoever for what we're doing in this country. It's sheer madness. And the frame I want to put on this is what Indiana is doing, which is similar to what Louisiana is doing under Bobby Jindal, what's happening in North Carolina and Tennessee. First of all, demonizing and disrespecting teachers and having a massive brain drain of some of the very best people in teaching, which is harmful to the kids, harmful to our schools. The average experience level of teachers in this country has dropped dramatically because of all this demonization. And the secondly is the privatization, the introduction of vouchers, the bridging of the line between church and state, the fact that no voucher program has ever been approved by the voters, only by legislators. Voters in this country love public education. They love their local public school. Look at the latest Fidelity Capita poll and you'll see this. But the two different visions of education that come through in this film are, first of all, that education exists to rank and rate and grade and evaluate, assign a number, assign a red light, green light, yellow light. You're a 4, you're a 3, you're a 2, you're a 1, you're a global competitor, you're not a global competitor. The winners are those who have the most. The advantaged kids do the best on the test. The disadvantaged kids are the losers. This is discouraging to teachers. They hate telling children they're failures, and the children are not failures. Some are late bloomers. But in any event, it's a terrible way to run a school system because it's harmful, it's abusive. There's a different way to run a school system, and that is, it's an idea that Linda Darling Hammond referred to in the film. The idea that the purpose of schooling is the full human development of every child. Whatever their talents, whatever their gifts, they deserve the best we can give them without putting a number on them and ranking them.
Dr. Ravitch, thank you. Many of you in the room may be well aware that Mr. Anlow and Dr. Ravitch have debated in the past in other forums, so they're familiar with each other's work. And Mr. Anlow, I want to give you the opportunity. I know you're well prepared to do 60 minutes on the 60-minute long film. We don't have that kind of time, but I'm very much interested in your reaction to the film and some thoughts about it.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to, first of all, say that I actually went to public schools as well, so I had my experience in public schools and enjoyed it. And it was great, and it worked for me. There are 4 reactions I have to the film that I want to share with you. One, I'm actually quite happy about some things. There are a lot of things that I think were great in the film. I agree, for example, that education should be our #1 priority and our #1 funding priority in America. There's no doubt about that. I agree that we don't pay enough for high-quality teachers. I absolutely agree that we need to advance the idea of teachers. 3, I really see and appreciate all of the incredible hard work of many of the teachers and administrators in our traditional public schools, and praise that across the country because there are a lot of them. So I think there's a terrific amount of all that I agree with. I agree with the idea of local control, a significant amount of support for that. In fact, Dr. Farabee here is trying to do just that at IPS, and I think that's a fantastic idea. Here's the other emotion though. Happy is one. Sad is the other, right? I'm actually quite sad that this became an us versus them movie, right? And I actually don't think people like myself really are all about trying to do everything we can to advance the quality of education across sectors, across whether it's the private sector, the charter school sector, or the traditional public sector. It really should be about advancing the highest quality education possible, the whole child, the magical moments across all the sectors, and fund it as we need. So I was really quite sad by the us and them mentality. I was also quite disappointed. I mean, to be honest with you, we can have this conversation. Some of the data is just directly wrong, right? And here's, for example, Finland and most of the other European countries fund private education with public dollars. Almost all of them do, right? And that's why I was confused, right? So the reality is public education is a very different thing, in my opinion. It's a very critical part for our democracy, but it's very different from public schooling, right? We agree and support the concept and need for public education funding. That is a really important thing. We need to fund it because we need better citizens, we need educated families, we need educated kids, but that's not necessarily the same thing as a system of one-size-fits-all school. We need to do everything we can to diversify, to allow more and more types of options out there, just like they do in Europe. That's how we fund. They don't have a prohibition in the rest of this world from public dollars going to religious and private schools, right? They know that it's about trying to get a high-quality education to all kids, and I think that's important, and that's certainly the goal that someone like myself has, is trying to ensure a high-quality education with teachers who are praised and deserve all the praise they can get.
Thank you, Mr. Anlin. Dr. Robinson, your thoughts, if you want to.
First of all, I want to thank my colleagues in West Lafayette for having the courage to do the film. I think that education is a very emotional topic because everybody's been to school. And I think we've got to not be afraid of having these kinds of conversations where we probably anger each other, because I don't think we do that enough. We definitely don't have these conversations with legislators. I think the first thing that touched me was the song at the beginning, "Wake Up Everybody." And I think that if nothing else, I hope this film is shown throughout the state to start the kind of discussions that we need to have. I think we have developed this concept as educators, and I've been one long enough to say that. We're sometimes our own worst enemy. One of the phrases in the film that just keeps going over and over through my mind is, who has the political will to do something about it? I think the other part, and I took a slightly different slant from the conversation about great school systems around the world. We can debate about funding, and that's another topic I hope I'll have much more time to talk about later. But if you listen to what the gentleman from Finland said, he talked about social welfare. Take care of the children. And I think we just totally lost the concept of taking care of the children. I think the other part was the concept of capable teachers and actually taking the time to make sure teachers are prepared and then paying them like the professionals that they are. I think the other thing that was just absolutely mind-boggling to me was that concept of the termites eating away at the foundation. Because I think that's what we allow to happen in public education. 10 years after it's done, we start to wake up and worry about it. So if nothing else, I hope that this evening we can have a much more lively debate from the perspective of an educator, from the perspective of people who are in the business of privatizing education, and come away understanding that I hope this film is going to start us having a much deeper conversation about what's going to happen 20 years from now, after all the experiments we've had with our children.
Thank you, Dr. Rock.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Butler University for hosting us here tonight, and I think it's terrific that on a Friday night we have a huge audience to come out and talk about the important issues facing public education. I agree with my colleagues up here on the panel and the film that it is the most important issue facing our country today. I guess that to me the first obvious thing that was missing from the movie was, what about the kids who haven't been successful in our public education system? From 2005 to 2010, 3,349 kids dropped out of the Indianapolis Public Schools, just one of our 11 school systems. Where are those kids tonight? Where are those kids today? And that needs to be an important part of the conversation. I understand the frustration that caused people to want to make this movie. I think one of the things that all of us need to do a better job of is to have a dialogue around these issues that's constructive. I had an interesting experience happen to me a few months ago. I was on a panel with a famous education reformer whom you would all know, and he started saying some of the typical things you hear from education reformers about the caliber of teachers coming into the system. My wife is a teacher, and she was sitting in the audience, and I had a moment and my back went up, and I kind of felt like I had to defend my wife and say, of course they're fantastic people in teaching, and we all know that. We in the reform community need to do a better job of having this conversation, and I think Wendy is just spot on. It's great that we can have these discussions. I think one of the things that I worry about in this movie is it was not contributing to a better understanding of some of these nuanced issues, but instead was kind of playing on some of our emotions, our base emotions. And we see this all the time in our political dialogue in this country, both on the left and on the right, and in all issues, and we're not better understanding these issues. And when charges get made that people are in the reform community to make money or they don't care about kids, that's a really, really troubling thing to say, and it's obviously not true. But it doesn't allow us to make those conversations, and folks can laugh about that, but you need to spend time with the people in the education reform community and understand their motives and why they're doing the work that they're doing. And some of the issues, there were so many different issues brought up in the discussion, I didn't think led to the kind of conversation that we had. So the issue of charter schools, there is a variety of quality on charter schools, but just to kind of assert the charters are bad or not doing better, I think doesn't allow us to focus on the policy issues that we need to focus on. The schools in Indianapolis that are sponsored by the mayor, according to a Credo study out of Stanford University, are outperforming their counterparts in the traditional public school system in 2 months in math and 3 months in reading. But we do have an issue in this state with too many authorizers, and now we are seeing a trend where charter schools that are not performing are being closed and then reopened by other authorizers. That's a big issue that we need to talk about. That's a nuanced issue. It's not just one charter schools are good or charter schools are bad. It's that in some circumstances they're working well, and then in other circumstances they're not working well. The conversation about a teacher evaluation came up in the movie, and that's a very charged issue, and I understand that. But in the Indianapolis Public Schools, about half of the students aren't passing both the math and English language arts section of the ISTEP exam, and about half aren't graduating when you take kids out of the equation who've gotten waivers. And yet, I just heard the Indianapolis Public Schools superintendent say the other day that 90% of teachers are rated as effective. So we need to have a conversation about what that means and what that tells us. And I think the more we can sit down and have a dialogue about each other, about these issues, the better off we're going to be.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Langley, your thoughts.
Okay, so when I was asked to be on the panel, and it became sort of public knowledge, a lot of people asked me, why you? What are you going to offer to this? And I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think that as the representative, boots on the ground teacher up here, I am, I think, supposed to be the bridge. So,
There's no pressure there, right?
yeah, so I'm going to fix it for all you. I think that, but I think it's, so my response to the film is this. If I'm going to be totally candid, I'm conflicted. And I'm conflicted because my experience is one that is unusual because I've had feet in both worlds. And they were honest feet in both worlds. I operated in, like others, I'm a product of public schools, traditional public schools. My parents were public school educators. And I started out in public schools, and when I went to go to a charter school, I didn't even go for the politics of it. That was really not interesting to me. I wasn't informed in that way. I didn't really care about the politics of it, and I suppose maybe that's naive, but for me it was the opportunity to go start a school. And as an educator who had been working for a while, if somebody says to you, you have a chance to go start someplace, who's going to say no? I mean, really, it's the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to go do. I cannot use the excuse of, well, I'm operating out of all this history. I can go help make something. So I'm conflicted because I know how hard it is at the ground level to do what is occurring in a school that's starting up. And now that I've sort of stepped away and more back to a more traditional space, I know how hard that is. And so for me, of course, the themes of the film, education is more than testing. Education needs to be equitable, full human development. Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I'm not particularly in favor of polarizing the conversation so that we don't move forward, though. And in the end, anything that inspires dialogue, productive forward movement dialogue, I think is a good thing.
I want to thank those of you in the audience who have submitted questions. We've got nearly a couple of dozen that we've selected for tonight. We will not have the opportunity to get through all of them, but I do want to drive through as many as possible. One questioner asks, if a fundamental problem in education reform is, in their words, a lack of trust by the public in the people who are charged with the education of our youth. If that is indeed true, what steps and actions can educators and community members take to rebuild mutual trust? Mr. Lineweaver, you mentioned the phrase boots on the ground. You're at the forefront of that. Talk about respect for teachers, your perception of it, how it could be improved.
Well, I mean, I'm not in a position to speak to how policy impacts that. I could tell you that from where I sit and where I have sat over the last 10 years or so, we build trust by creating transparency. I think that is an essential aspect of how you need to run a school. I think you need to be honest and sincere. And it may seem, again, like it's kind of Pollyanna, but I believe this stuff, and I believe that it's important. I mean, from my perspective, how I build trust with my kids is the same way I would expect it, in the grand scheme, and that is that we put the most highly qualified people in places to be able to inform the conversation. And you listen to them, and you ask a lot of questions, and you don't do things without research and looking at why you do the things you do. So I think, again, transparency is essential. I think putting the highly qualified people where they need to be, and I think looking at the results at the end of the day and being honest about that.
Dr. Robinson, you're another link at the sort of other end of that same chain, and I'm sure this is an issue that you deal with on a daily basis, this idea of respect for teachers, for educators in general, at any level. How do you address that in your district, and how big of a challenge is it on a daily or weekly basis?
Well, I think it's a challenge for anybody in public education because of mass media, the internet. One person can start a rumor that within 15 minutes, 1,000 people believe it's true because they heard it and read it on the internet. I think that part of what we try to do in the Fort Wayne Community Schools is to have a very strong, first of all, school board. People who are absolutely committed to making certain that they're the connection with the community, they're the policymakers, but that they are transparent, our board meetings are televised, We have more work sessions on topics that people probably don't even talk about in public, but we believe that as you do the business of the district, if people don't see you doing your business, they can always mistrust what you do. I mean, the second thing you absolutely have to do is to make absolutely certain that you're providing the kind of programming and you're inviting parents and community members into your schools. We are partners with every single agency, social agency. We provide services to the parochial schools, the private schools. We provide, through our food service center, food services to other schools. And when you are that integral to the community, people get to see you. But I think the main thing you have to do is to make certain that you hire the right teachers, you provide them with the right materials and support, and that is professional development, because as professionals, they have to hone their craft. And then you make absolutely certain that we have parent-teacher conferences twice a year. K-12, we bring our parents in, we explain to them what we're doing, and little by little, people begin to trust you because all the mystique is removed if they are actively engaged in the governance of their schools. But I think that one of the things that we're going to struggle with, no matter how, and I think we do a pretty good job, the opposition that wants to paint with a broad brush, and I understand you work in Indianapolis, but the first example you used was the Indianapolis Public Schools. I'm an urban school district, so people don't bother to come to Fort Wayne, but because I'm about the same size as Indianapolis, whatever people see in Indianapolis must be happening in Fort Wayne. So I think we're going to have to start having people who actually are having policy or putting out propaganda, who are actually doing reports, go into schools. You have to actually go into a school and be a part of the activity. So I think part of the emotion is that everybody sees it from their own lens, but until you actually are a part of seeing what teachers do every day, and that parent in this movie, I can give you 10 of those parents, because that's really how parents feel about their local school. Now, they may think the one next door is no good, but most parents, because they have been in the building and have received the services, have a different view. So it's a daily